Professor Yaro, who will be talking about migrating from poverty to opportunity. He is a professor of human geography at the University of Ghana. He's currently the principal of the University of Ghana, Accra City campus, and also the West Africa Regional Hub Coordinator for the Futures Agricultural Consortium. His teaching interests reflect a combination of development studies and rural geography. He has done extensive research in rural Ghana in the areas of livelihood, migration and development, climate change adaptation, land tenure, agricultural commercialization, and food security. Once again, thank you so much, Professor Yaro, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your research, your interest, your work in this particular field.
Mentioned, I'll be looking at migrating from poverty to opportunity. As previous speakers have spoken a lot more on international migration, I want to focus on internal migration within countries. And it has already been stressed that migration has always been a very important source of livelihoods to people. It's a way in which people are able to get out of poverty. And the opportunities that are presented in destination areas present them that opportunity to migrate out of poverty. And it is high time that we begin to focus on opportunities rather than on poverty, and rather than on the fact that you have places that are unable to generate the needed livelihood capitals that people need to get out of poverty. So we want to argue that we must think opportunity. When we hear the word migration, anytime you hear migration, let's think of opportunity. What are the opportunities out there? Where are the opportunities? Who can take advantage of these opportunities? What are the filters that, through which these opportunities are filtered? And what needs to be done to make migrants make the most of these opportunities that are out there? Now I will attempt to provide some reasoning, some arguments, and some examples of the case I'm presenting. So first of all, poverty should be seen as a lack of opportunity. It's the inability of people to access what would make their livelihoods move smoothly. And for widows in development studies, we know of the livelihood capitals that are needed. And we also understand the processes and the policies that through which these livelihood capitals lead to outcomes for sustainable livelihoods or unsustainable ones. So poverty is, in my opinion, is simply a lack of opportunity. And this lack of opportunity is irrespective of your individual characteristics. So as to whether it's gender, it's age, it's tribe, what the main thing is opportunity. After that, we can look at the different filters through which people make use of these opportunities, the extent to which they make use of these opportunities. So lack of opportunities, as we know historically, has emanated from discrimination across whether sex, gender, race, tribe, caste, and others. Then, of course, most importantly, has been regional imbalances in development and investments, which actually captures most of the other elements. So the fact that certain regions and countries are not being developed, while some areas are being focused on. And we can see this using the last point, the policies of colonialism and an immediate post-colonial policy, whereby regions that have the resources that are needed by the colonial powers were most, that is where investments went to, that is where attention was turned to, meaning that you have several other regions that were marginalized. And therefore, we have a landscape of inequality spatially, and of course also that has also created certain social inequalities, because you have sectors that have been well developed and others that are less developed. So the idea of faulty things, faulty policies, and of course, also certain traditional norms, practices, and rules have been, very instrumental in defining social differentiation. That is an important filter through which opportunities are utilized. So now migration, therefore, as an access to opportunities that are existent in other geographical spaces, and not, of course, emanating from the discrimination, from all the factors that I've talked about. So we should see people's ability to move to places where they are able to access the kind of livelihood capitals, where they are able to take advantage of economic buoyancy, right? Where they are able to escape the excruciating conditions in their own areas of origin. So migration, therefore, should be seen as opening up possibilities. We move from lagging regions. Lagging regions are basically regions that do not have the necessary infrastructure. They don't have the necessary industry, including a buoyant agriculture, right, to be able to get them out of poverty. So therefore, we see this as a natural, logical response. There is, to meeting migrant aspirations. And what are migrant aspirations? That they all want a sustainable livelihood. But of course, we should take note that opportunity zones change over time, that there are many places, that in 1960s and 70s were out migrating zones, and that today have changed because, government policies have changed. The need for resources have changed. And of course, we all know from 2007, the global food crisis, has also led to many open areas that were considered useless, now an opportunity zone for commercial agriculture, especially in Africa. So we should also see return migration as very important, because return migration is beginning to become an opportunity. Why? Because most origin areas are also beginning to build up as a result of either policy and, of course, long-term remittances that have been sent over the past 10, 20, 2, 3 decades that have led to the origin areas also becoming attractive and therefore creating opportunities. So migration should be conceptualized holistically as transformative, right? Where we should give greater appreciation for diversity and tolerance, where you have people who have changed perspectives because they've met new cultures and new ways of doing things. Now, so for the ideas today, let's attempt this framing of the migration, poverty, opportunity nexus. And as I stressed earlier on, can we begin to see the migration process through the eyes of opportunity? So what happens? What do we see? Classically, we have the origin, right, where poverty, high vulnerability, and of course, a less developed economy, which is compounded by some social and environmental rigidities. And migrant aspirations are certainly to get out of poverty, right, to reduce their vulnerability, right, to improve upon their economic circumstances, and to escape from major sources of unfreedom that you have social systems, keeping them in. And for many of them, environmental rigidity, such as climate change effects, droughts, floods, and what have you, that makes their ability to survive on especially agriculture less. So they look out for opportunities. So migrant aspirations are met by the existence of opportunities elsewhere in destination areas. What are some of these opportunities? Ability to, jobs, right? Land and natural resources, which we often do not, take seriously, because many origin areas are poor soils or have degraded soils, have, overmined, or of course, desertification taken over. So land and natural resources become very important, especially for rural people who migrate. And of course, diversified activities. We know in many urban areas, you do have lots more diversification of economic activity than in rural areas, and also in regions where the population and economic buoyancy is low. Then, of course, opportunities for education and skills, right? Where you have tertiary institutions and well-endowed, schools compared to origin areas. And of course, freedom from tradition. I know some of our previous speakers have mentioned this. Freedom from tradition is very important. Migration is not only an economic move, it is also in response to social issues such as, certain traps or rigidities of tradition. And an example is marriage. For many others, starting a new life is very important. And new perspectives in life are great. And these are opportunities that certainly meet migrants' aspirations, since migrants' aspirations is basically improvement in well-being. And improvement in well-being is not only in the economic domain, but also in social, environmental, and psychological and emotional domains. So, but however, opportunities are dynamic and they are created. They don't drop from heaven. Who creates them? State policies are very important. And we know why state policy in terms of investments, in terms of bringing about the kicking off certain local economies and development partners. We know for many developing countries, the process is driven by development partners, in terms of development paradigms and the loans that are given for specific purposes and where they should go to. And in the case of Ghana, you have examples of the fact that most development partners will direct their loans to where you have got cocoa and where you have got gold being produced or where you have oil being produced compared to where they do not receive their imports from. And of course, increasing local and global demand, as I mentioned earlier on. Infrastructural growth is very important, but that changes, the attractiveness of places. Local resource endowments, great, and social norms, rules, and laws. These are important, where you have destination areas with very rigid and very unfavorable social norms. Certainly, you don't expect to have people go in there. But as long as there's relaxation in urban areas where most, traditional norms are going down, they tend to attract more people than in rural areas. But however, there is a contingency. Not every opportunity can be, taken up by everyone. So you have got the socioeconomic characteristics of the migrant that is very important, and that has to do with, what social class they come or economic class they come from. You have got destination conditions, which are really important. Where you go to is important. Not every destination provides you that opportunity to improve well-being by a certain margin. And you have got, of course, individual resilience or agency. Agency is important. We talk of structures, but the agency is really what, of course, eventually overturns structures. And then the differential utilization of opportunities, by each individual and families. So what are the outcomes? We should conceptualize outcomes in terms of short-term and long-term. We often mix the two, and then we make faulty judgments as to the relevance of migration in reducing poverty. So in short term, you might have, reduced poverty, but on a lower scale. You can have increased well-being, but probably not that much. And it's often amidst several difficulties and challenges. But on the long term, we should be looking out for intergenerational shifts, significant ones, not just, minor ones in social class over time. So this is the thinking behind my talk. Just 3 case studies. I hope I still have some time.
I'll give you another 2 minutes.
Okay, so the first one, take rural to urban migration, for instance, of female headquarters in Ghana. And in the northern part of Ghana, which has been a lagging region, education is generally very low, and among women is terribly low. But as a result of neoliberal policy and, of course, colonial discrimination, you have the southern cities being very buoyant, thriving, and therefore you have many girls traveling there to carry, as you can see in the photo, and they earn several times what they would have gotten from rural farm wages. This has been beneficial to them in terms of skills, in terms of capital accumulation, and of course, return migration, that majority are returning back home with the capital they have and being prepared to start life. I mean, just moving alone is an opportunity for you to be able to resettle back home. But of course, it comes with lots of difficulties, exploitation, health, sanitation risk, but the outcomes, right, can be positive. There's improved livelihoods in the origin, right, in terms of remittances for their families. But of course, there is a trade-off between what their own progression and that of their families. But over time, you are looking at the importance of this in social mobility. Then we look at the case of rural to rural migration, female cashew pickers in Ghana. You know, the neoliberal paradigm being used in Ghana, whereby the state and development partners are encouraging commercial farms, mango, cashew, and what have you, means that in those land abundant societies, there's a shortage of farm labor, where because locals themselves are busy on their own farms, that has led to migrant women filling in the gap. And of course, commercial farmers, because of the shortage, are creating networks of recruitment. And some of the women themselves are forming groups and bringing other women along with them. This is an important source of seasonal income. And this is very important in terms of setting them up in the origin. But however, the contingency, travel costs, of course, ability to join networks or social networks, hard work, that is individual agency, of course, your savings, culture and investment strategies back home determine what these guys eventually come out with. All right, so this is well known, formal employment in the state, that all lagging regions will often have educated, young men and women, and they all move to the big cities where you have government organizations and the private sector, banks and whatnot. This is the group that really end up, taking up, making full utilization of opportunities. And life becomes much better for most of them. But interestingly, the idea that only better off families, benefit more is not really the case, because you have at least a significant number of poor groups making it through as a result of conscious effort to educate this. Right, so in conclusion, a quick summary is that, of course, creating opportunities is very important. And of course, it has to be spatially balanced. I mean, the geography of opportunities must be looked into by every policy. And of course, removing barriers to lower classes, from accessing these opportunities, right? Of course, everyone has access to the opportunity, but how you use it is important. And that is where we have contingency coming in. And we think that we should pursue in a gradual manner, right, the building of capacity that will enable intergenerational social mobility, because that is really the essence. We can't nip poverty now. We need to create the conditions that will get families or households out of poverty, through the generations that follow. But of course, as we have seen, the social differentiation is very important, and it leads to different outcomes for migrants and the utilization of opportunities and reducing poverty. However, a disclaimer, migration would not stop because of the above suggestions, because most of them are about what? Equalization of economic opportunities. And as we have all seen from the other speakers, right, that there are other forms of opportunities, right, moving away, taking advantage of social and environmental, emotional, opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Yaro. As you started with your presentation, you mentioned that, we should see migration as a form of opportunity. And I think one thing we tend to forget is that the migrants moving to these destination countries are also adding value to where they're going, whether it be in skills or bringing culture with them. So it is an opportunity for anyone going there and for anyone meeting the migrants that they might be interacting with. Thank you very much for sharing.